Afternoon, everybody. Time for another installment of Dave's Garage. I am Dave, and this is my garage. So we're going back to the basics here. People have asked for this stuff, and who knows, there's people out there, you may think, who needs this? Well, everybody started somewhere, right? You get your first bike, and you don't want to have the dealer do the oil changes. It may seem daunting if you've never done it before. So we're going to go through the basics. I'm going to do it on my Speed Twin because that's the one that's now due. But, you know, the same applies for any bike. The difference is going to be where's the drain plug, where's the filter, is it under a fairing where you got to pull plastic off to get to it. But the principles of the oil change are the same. So we're going to do it for this bike because that's what I've got. You don't need much in the way of tools. In this case, the drain plug is not held in by a socket. You don't need a bolt. It is a bolt, but you're going to use I don't know if that's an 8mm or whatever. I think that's an 8. Yeah, that's an 8mm. There's a drain plug up underneath. Let's see if I can show it. Right there. So look at where your kickstand mounts on this bike, and then right there. So we're going to loosen that. Make sure when you're upside down, remember your lefty loosey, righty tighty. So right now, this would be if I pull it. Whoops. If I go this way, that's going to be counterclockwise. So we got that, and I've got a 17 mil because I'm using the HiFlo filters. So I've got that nut right there, which also then allows me to safety wire this for track use. So all we have to do is move that with this, let the oil drain out, and same thing with the filter. Get yourself a rubber glove because you are going to get oil on your hands. Now before you do that, come over to the other side of the bike. Remove your filler cap, which I also have safety wired. Put it there somewhere. You want to get oil on the ground. So there might be a little drop of oil. Put it on there. Make sure that surface is clean. The reason for that is you don't want the oil to kind of blop, 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 pour out like that. You want it to be a nice smooth pour so it doesn't splash in the pan and splash on the surrounding area. So we're going to go ahead and put on the glove. Now some bikes I've been able to get in there and get the plug out without getting my hands oily, but also have brake cleaner and a roll of paper towels nearby because you're going to need it. So the first thing you want to do is make sure this is pretty much centered. So if oil splashes, it's not very likely to. These things are only to about 15 or 18 foot-pounds. It's not that much. They don't need to be. You really don't want to over-torque this because this aluminum pan and you got a steel bolt. So if something strips, it ain't going to be the bolt. It's going to be the pan. So do this, thread it out. All right, got a little bit on my hands, not too much. But that's why I'm wearing gloves. Get some paper towels. Again, carefully, so you don't want to get oil on the ground or anywhere on the bike or any of that kind of stuff. So we're going to let that drain out until it stops dribbling. And while we're doing that, I'm going to talk about, there's two schools of thought. There's the manual, and then there's other people. I'm kind of on the fence. Have two schools of thought on when do you drain the oil. And I don't mean by mileage and all that stuff. Go by what the manual says. I actually do mine more often than the manual calls for. I do it every 2,000 miles, 1,500 miles, somewhere in there, or a track day. Whichever comes first. What I'm referring to as far as when to do the oil change is I normally like to do it cold. And so the school of thought is, well, it flows better when the oil is warm. Okay. The problem is if the bike's been sitting out, all night, all the oil that's going to drain out of the motor and all the little cooling channels and all that stuff are now down in the bottom of the pan. If you start the bike up and you warm it up, all that oil is getting pushed all the way up through the motor, and it's going to be all throughout the motor. And so you're not getting as much of the oil out. What is in the pan and flows back when it's warm will flow a little better, but it's not like synthetic oil flows like molasses. So I always do my oil changes cold, just because I'm going to get more of the oil out of the pan because more of the oil is there than the extra 5 ounces that are going to take 5 or 6 hours to slowly make their way down. You know, the bulk of the oil goes bloop down in the bottom, but there's still a lot of oil all up in all the little nooks and crannies in there. So I feel like you get a more complete drain doing it cold. Now, the other school of thought is that you need that the contaminants in the oil settle out. And so they're there in the bottom of the pan, and the oil coming out might not bring all the contaminants with it. I don't know if anybody's ever done a scientific, I mean, both of them logically make sense to me. One says I get more oil, more of the old oil out. And then the other school of thought says, yeah, but you'll get less dirty oil out, but you might get more contaminants out. But then I'm like, well, if the filter's doing its job, then why are there contaminants sitting in the bottom of the pan? You know, so I don't know. Do it whichever way you want. Another thing we need to do is replace the drain plug, or the crush washer. So I have different sizes for different bikes. That's the one we want for that. Throw the old one out. Do not reuse them. Some people will flip them and reuse them. I have in a pinch if I didn't have any. But you can buy these on Amazon, the whole pack, for like $5. So why not just buy new ones and replace them every time? They're not expensive. All right. So now that the oil plug is out, I'm going to just keep letting it drain like that. And now we're going to go for the filter. Now, if you got the OEM filter, if you can reach in and grab it and turn it, great. Most of the time you can't, especially because you're only supposed to put it hand tight. Yet somehow the person at the factory never seems to get the memo on that. So what we want to do is I use HiFlo. I used to use K&Ns, then I had one blow out. That welded nut you see right there, that blew out and blew a quart of oil, literally a whole quart of oil all over the back of the bike and the tires. Luckily I didn't crash, but that was only because my Speed Triple had really good traction control. So let's see, let's lower that. So I use these because it has that nut. It's very easy to grab that with a 17 mil and then twist it off. It's not that, you know, they're not torqued on there so much because they're not supposed to be, so that you need all that leverage. It just makes it easier. If you don't have that, if you got the OEM, they sell what looks like a thin metal, almost like stamped sheet metal, and it looks like a giant sprocket. Socket. And that will go over, you know, because there's like a hexagonal shape on the top. And that'll let you, it's called a filter wrench, so you can do that. This part, I'm going to get oil in my hands, so I'm going to get some paper towels over here ready to go. But again, I'm using a glove, so it hopefully shouldn't be too much. Well, or not. Or it is. So again, you want to be careful not to splash it all over the underside of the bike, because any mess you make, you're going to have to clean that shit up. And this stuff runs over your hands, so you want to make sure that your hand is centered and part of your hand isn't like left over the edge, because it could get on your hand and then bloop, get on the floor, and then you got to clean it out of the concrete or carpet or whatever floor surface you have. So yeah, this is a little bit messier, and that's because I was out riding the bike before. Normally there wouldn't have been as much oil coming out of the filter. It would have more settled down into the pan. All right, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn this over. Make sure you have a good grip on it, because you will oftentimes go whoops and drop it, and then it splashes oil everywhere, including on the floor. All right, so this is an HF204. You know, I really hope I have a 204 up there. I just realized I might not have one of these filters. Shit. Well, that'll be another tip for Dave's Garage. Make sure you get the right goddamn filters. Let's see. I don't like reusing a filter if I don't have to. I never have. But there's a first time for everything, so let me go over and look and see before I throw this in the trash. This filter's only probably got 1,500 miles on it, but in a pinch if I had to. I've already drained the oil, so now I'm kind of committed here. HiFlo 303, 153. Woo, we got one left. Good. This is what I use. HiFlo 204RC. I need to go ahead and order some more of those. I'm sorry, 204RC. The RC is the, I think, racing filter. What that does is that means it has the nut on the end. For this bike, I'll throw a link in there so you can find them, but it's an HF204RC. My Kawasaki uses HF204RC, and then my wife's Ducati Monster uses, I think, a 303. So I've got plenty of those over there, but apparently I just used my last Triumph filter. So let's go ahead and get back up in there. Notice the oil's really just sort of slowing down now. Not much up in there. So open up as a new filter. Take the seal off. They always say that these are pre-oiled. Whatever. Get your fingers a little dirty. Get some motor oil. Just put a light film around that gasket. I'm going to take a paper towel, kind of wipe up some of that excess that was sort of... and I just dropped that in there. So I've got a bunch of good pointers in today's Dave's Garage of what not to do. Here I am trying not to make a goddamn mess. And what am I doing? I'm making a goddamn mess. All right, let's see if we can extricate myself from this and put that in the box. Put that over there on a paper towel. And it leaks through the box, go into the paper towel, we're good to go. Bob's your uncle. All right. So now, I'm going to install the new one. When we're done in here, we're going to take a paper towel with some brake cleaner. We're going to wipe everything up. So that was a 204. In goes the new 204, which is really hard when you got oil on your glove. All right, so let me just get enough of a grip so when I take my hand away, it's not going to fall into the oil and make more mess. All right. We got about as much as is going to come out of here for now. So I'm going to go ahead and put this bolt in here so I can wipe this all up so it stops dripping. I can get in there and tighten everything up. All right, let's get that seated by hand. That'll be enough just to seal it from dripping. Now we want to get up in there. Okay. So now at this point, I'm going to slowly move this out of the way. Be careful so it doesn't slosh back and forth. Get that out of the way. This way I got more room to work here. I'm also going to put down a little more paper towels just in case there's a drop or two. I don't want it getting on there. And so now, let's see. We're going to tighten this. So let's see. I want to go this way. So you do it until it just starts to make contact. Okay? So it's going up. All right, it just made contact, and then basically you do one turn. So I kind of do these by hand. There's no torque setting, I don't think, for an oil filter, at least none that I've ever heard. You basically do it hand tight. So this is, again, one of those things you do by feel. But if you don't know what it's supposed to feel like, what you can do is mark it or look for some lettering or something on there to use as a reference point. So what I'm going to do is this hole, there's a hole on the other side. So we're going to go that's a little more than half a turn. There's one turn. That's it. That's all you got to do. And then that lines up with my safety wire and my clip. I use the clip so I can reuse it, not have to re-safety wire it each time. So that can't loosen. Depending on what group you're on in track days, they do check that. I also just do it. I figure it's good for track days. And it also makes sense. It's one less thing to have to worry about. I am going to get a new drain plug that has more material. There's ones that are extended so that I can drill a hole through it, and then I can safety wire and clip that as well. For now, I don't have that, so I've never actually had one come loose. So, okay. So here, this is supposed to be like 15 to 18 foot-pounds. I, again, do it by feel because I know what that feels like because I've done hundreds of these. But you snug it up, and then it's not a lot. It's kind of like one or two little and that's it. That's all it needs. If you have one like mine where you can't really safety wire it properly, but you want it to be just a little more secure, what you can do is go ahead and put some RTV. Clean it with some brake cleaner, which I'm going to do when I'm all done. And then you can put a drop of RTV. That'll hold it from loosening, and then you can peel it off. But we're going to replace that drain plug at some point in the future. So now we're done with draining all the oil. So we'll get our tools out of the way, paper towels, all that stuff. Take off my glove. And let's go get a funnel. Let's see. Does the big funnel fit in there? That would help me pour it faster. Not quite. That would fall out. So let's grab this one, the yellow one. Grab the small one. Perfect. Okay. This has a sight window down here. I don't remember offhand how many quarts of oil. So we're going to start with 2 or 3 and see where the level is. The good news is that you can kind of just watch it. So now I've been switching to the Quicksilver recently. For a bike like this that's not as high revving, I would probably still use the Rotella T6 5W40 full synthetic. Great oil, JSO MA, MA2 certifications, all the stuff for wet clutch. It's fine to use. But it's almost impossible to get. So I switched to the Quicksilver, and then I forgot to order some. I used it all on that after the track day. So let's go ahead and extend this. And I think there we can probably get, you can be able to see the view there when I shine the light on it. So what I'm using is actually what the bike, what the manual recommends, which is what my local AutoZone happen to have in stock. It's $11 plus tax per quart. I normally get the gallon jug of Quicksilver for $32. It's not that much cheaper, but all right. Pour in the lifeblood of the motor. So we're going to pull it in. Start with 2 quarts, take a measurement. As you can see, this is not a daunting task. Now, anyone who's had a motorcycle for a while and done this stuff is probably going, duh. Well, this isn't really for you. This is for the new rider who's, you know, they wanted to get a motorcycle. They've never done this stuff before. Maybe they didn't even have a dirt bike. So this is for those people. Like I said earlier, we all had to start somewhere. Nobody popped out knowing how to do all this stuff. So, all right, let's go to the next one. This will be quart number 2. Yeah, the Cowie, well, that's a 1.44 liter motor. So that one uses over 4 quarts. This one, I couldn't remember if it was 4 or it was closer to 3. And just so that I wasn't caught without, I bought 5 quarts of oil. But that's fine. Sometimes a bike burns a little oil, or you notice your buddy's is a little low and you got to top it off for some reason. So it's always better to have more than you need. If you don't end up opening it, you'll just use it on the next oil change. No biggie. All right, we're still not in the sight window. Go ahead and add a 3rd quart. Granted, I could have just looked this up in the manual. I don't even know where my manual is. It's around here somewhere, but I didn't have it readily available. But when it's got the sight window, you can see where the oil level is. So, you know, not a big deal. All right. Nope, still not in the window. Dump the rest of the 3rd quart in, see where we're at. We'll go on to the 4th. Now, I normally actually don't like buying oil in these smaller containers because when you have to get rid of your used motor oil, and you should, any auto parts store will take the stuff for free. Okay, so that was 3, and we're up to about there. So I'm actually in the range. I like it to be just a little bit more. So here's what I do. Let me go get a paper towel and get this thing out of there. All right, so what I prefer to do is, I know it's going to need just a little bit more because there's no oil in the filter yet, okay? So what we're going to do is, I'm going to put the filler cap back in. You don't want to start the motor without it, or it'll start spitting little bits of oil everywhere as the clutch and stuff spins around. So right now I'm unsafe. I'm not low, but I know it's a little lower than I'm going to want it to be. So hopefully the camera's picking that up. You can see right where that level is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the motor for just a minute, just to get the oil circulating. And then I'm going to walk away. I'm going to come back in like an hour or two or tomorrow morning and see where that level is. I know that it's going to pump several ounces of oil into that filter. Now you could just go it up to the top where you're not above the line, and it should come back down. Use your own judgment. I mean, there's no right or wrong way necessarily. As long as you end up in the range of what the motor wants to have. You could go up a couple more millimeters knowing it's going to come back down to the center mark once that filter gets full of oil. I'm just going to do this. Let it run for a minute, let it pump it through the system, and then it'll all drain back. And I'll come back in a couple hours and just see where it's at. And then I'll add a couple more ounces to top it off as needed. Then I'll put my safety wire back on. And then we're done. That's it. I was saying before, I like the gallon jugs because when I want to dispose of that motor oil, I have another funnel that I only use for dirty motor oil. And then I'll use this empty jug here. I'll pour all this stuff in there. And at that point, that bin is pretty much full of jugs of used motor oil. And I'll go over to the local auto parts store and drain them. You know, they'll take it for free. You just got to pour it in the big vat they have in the back there. So that's an oil and filter change. Honestly, that's really all you got to do. You know, at some point we'll get enough miles on here, we'll go change the air filter, and that's easy. Just a couple screws that slides out over here. But that's all you got to do for an oil change on a Speed Twin. So we've drained it, put a new crush washer, new filter. We'll go over it once more with a paper towel, a little bit of brake cleaner, just clean up, make sure there's no oil there that drips on the garage later. We've refilled it. We're going to run it and then let it drain and see where our level's at. And if I got to add a couple ounces, I'll crack open another bottle and we'll add a couple ounces and we're good to go. So hopefully for all you new guys looking to do this for yourselves and you don't want to pay a dealer $100 to do an oil change, you can pick up oil depending on what you get, knowing that this only needs a little over 3 quarts. 4 quarts of oil is $42. Or if you can get the jug of Quicksilver off Amazon, it's $33, and you'll have left over to top off, you know, later on and stuff if you needed to. So HiFlo filters, I think, are like $13 a piece. They're right around the same price as OEMs, but I like that they have those nuts on the end so that you can safety wire them. That's it. No big mystery. Feel free to leave comments and ask questions, but hope you enjoy that installment of Dave's Garage.